I keep saying that in this film, my character doesn't have a name. And the reason that is because we're not telling the story of one person. We're telling the story of millions of people.
Sometimes I feel like I've already seen everything that's going to happen. And it's a nightmare.
I've heard in interviews that you interviewed folks who went through substance abuse and spoke with veterans in your preparation for this. And I'm curious if you could tell me something specific that you brought from those conversations that really helped you inform the role.
Those conversations are private between them and myself. I would feel uncomfortable sharing some of the things that they shared with me. But what I can say is that the sheer volume of information I got on what it means to be a drug addict and what it means to be someone suffering from PTSD was so helpful in the process of making this film, because truth be told, I didn't know much about either of those things. So the more information I got from people about their experiences, the more well-rounded and the stronger a character I could make.
I guess one story I could tell, something that I was very nervous about going into the film, just because it's so difficult to do research on this one specific aspect of drug abuse, is learning what it was like to tweak. It was a concept that I didn't really understand. I had a hard time figuring out what exactly it meant to say that someone was tweaking and what that looked like. And I got a wonderful show, and we had lots of laughs, honestly, at the rehab facility, of people showing me what it would look like. And that was extremely helpful for me at the same time, because it's something that, can feel quite outrageous unless you're given the permission to do that, if that makes sense, unless you have someone there who's been there and done that, saying, that's too far. Yes, this is what it looks like.
Sure, because if you do it wrong, the people who are sort of watching it are going to know right off the bat that doesn't look authentic.
Right, and the last thing I want to be is insensitive towards anyone who has experienced this, because it is an extraordinarily terrifying, painful thing to go through.
Sure.
So like approaching something like that involves so much physicality with an appropriate level of sensitivity was really important to me.
It is fascinating watching it a second time to realize how far they evolve from the beginning. You go back to the love story when you rewatch it, and it's like, oh my gosh, when you know where their characters are going, it's pretty fascinating to see how far they go.
And they did a great job of physically transforming, I thought, themselves, and really committing to that physical transformation, hair, makeup, weight, muscles, working out, like everything. They put a tremendous amount of effort, both of those actors, into these roles, and into the level of detail, talking to dozens of ex-addicts, dozens of vets with PTSD, and hearing these really tragic stories and pulling that information into their performances.
You're gonna make it through this.
I love you.
I normally don't care that much about how it's filmed, but it feels like this should have been shot chronologically so that you could experience the arc properly. Were you able to? I'm stunned when I went back to revisit it, how different you are at the beginning of the film to where you are.
Right, right. We actually shot it in reverse.
Oh my
So
God.
we started with Dope Life, which I found to be really helpful because it gave us some time prior to filming to really get into the right space mentally as well as physically. I know Tom and I both really shredded ourselves for this movie in both ways. So that was nice to then go to the depths there with Tom as well and develop that friendship and that trust and that respect that I think allowed us to bring this light and love for each other in the beginning of the movie.
That was actually Tom's request, because during the addiction sequences, he wanted to lose weight, and he ended up losing close to 30 pounds, almost a quarter of his body weight. Mm-hmm. And he felt it was easier to do that in prep, hold that weight off for the first few weeks, then put it on. That'd be easier than doing the reverse. But unfortunately, we wrote some reshoot scenes while because Anthony and I are very iterative. While we direct, we also edit. So we have a very loose improvisational process with editorial, where we look for ideas. And that we came up with an idea for a couple of scenes that were back in the addiction phase. So he had to lose all that weight again a second time at the end of the movie.
That's just mean.
Yeah, I know.
It just sounds mean.
But it serviced the movie.
Believe me, we felt very badly about it. But not so badly we didn't want to do it.
Why would you do that?
Sometimes I feel like I've already seen everything that's gonna happen.
Holland, how did you almost break your nose on this set? It feels like you're always almost breaking your nose.
Almost. Yeah. You can see it's right here. If you give that a little rub, Lost City of Z, Chaos Walking. Yeah, I'm pretty injury prone. I'm nursing an injury at the moment. I've hurt my knee on set, so Marvel and Sony have sent me home for 3 days, and I'm losing my mind, not doing anything, knowing that Jacob and Zendaya are having so much on set without me. But I basically just banged my nose by accident on the steering wheel of a car, and it was not my most heroic moment. It looks great in the film, and I would do it again.
Oh, it's in there? We can see it?
I'm not sure if it's in there, but I do know in those takes I am going absolutely ballistic, and it wouldn't surprise me if the boys use that take.
We tend to be very character focused in how we approach narrative. You know, I think a lot of people used to say this about our comedy work, that it was a very character orientated, character grounded comedy. And we also used to hear the same thing when we started making Winter Soldier and the Marvel movies, that we had very character-based action as well. And I think that that is indicative of just our approach to storytelling in general, which is like we tend to design everything around the exploration of character, and we tend to structure the narrative around the exploration of character. Now, we were following this character over an 18-year chunk of his life, and he had some very extreme experiences during different periods of those 18 years. So it did have this very epic Odyssean type journey to it. But it was always the sort of unfolding, coherent narrative, almost linear narrative of a young man coming of age and making life choices that cause him some consequences, unanticipated consequences, and then how he deals with those consequences. So there is a real linear sort of layout to the story in terms of like it's all a function of the character's choices and how one choice leads to a consequence, leads to another choice, leads to a consequence. So that was one way we created the sense of cohesion, is that there's a cause and effect pushing us through the narrative. But secondly, one of the other powerful ways we connected everything was through our use of score and our work with our composer, Henry Jackman.
Yeah.
I mean, people often turn to composers for this, to add a layer of cohesion and connectivity through a narrative. But I feel like we leaned on Henry even more so than we have in the past, and even more so than usual in this movie, because it did really require a lot of work on a musical level to allow audiences, especially this is where he keyed in and where we needed the most help, was to sort of key into the relationship between Cherry and Emily. Mm-hmm. And he developed a love theme for those two characters that he was able to explore very cleverly in different ways musically throughout the movie. And I think it's that, whether you're conscious of it or not while you're watching the movie, that is doing a lot of the work of connecting the dots in the film for you on an emotional level, on a psychological level.
I think Cherry works so well because at every step of the way, the character remains relatable. We can relate to every decision he makes. And to me, that is the strength of your portrayal of Peter Parker as well, too. I think he's the most relatable version that we've seen on screen up until this point.
Hey, Karen, what else can this suit do? What?
How crucial is relatability to you in that? And do you feel that you've made Peter more relatable with each time you get to play him?
Yeah, I mean, that was always our goal when we started off, with the idea of introducing Peter Parker to the MCU. Obviously, in the MCU, you've got the billionaire, you've got the god, you've got the soldier. And when I came in, it was now time to have the kid. You know, everyone goes to school, everyone does homework, everyone talks to their crush for the first time and embarrasses themselves, and everyone wishes that they could be a superhero. So we really tapped into the idea of making him as relatable as possible. And I think it's been our secret weapon. Because people watch these films and look at Peter Parker and can see themselves in him, especially when he becomes Spider-Man.
I watched a Q&A for this film a couple of weeks ago, and it was moderated by none other than Robert Downey Jr., and he was gushing over your performance and I was like getting teary for you, like in the moment. I was blown away by this. Whose review of this movie and your performance in particular is going to be the most important for you to hear, or have heard, or may hear down the line if they haven't yet seen it?
Ultimately, the people that I care about most, it's not someone big or famous, but the people that I spoke to at the facility, because they lent so much to me and allowed me to go to the places that I needed to go to bring Emily to life. They gave me that information. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did with this part or with this project. So I just hope to do them proud. Those are the reviews I'm most nervous for.
I have this noise in my head.
It'll stop. One day it'll go quiet.